them.
There's not a prison built that will ever shut me up.
They call them rebels.
Basket of deplorables.
They call them rogues.
They claim to guns or religion.
And they say they're outlaws.
These are the kind of guys you like to smack in the ass.
War Room presents Rebels, Rogues, and Outlaws.
You set out to take Vienna. Take Vienna!
The national bestseller by longtime Bannon producer Dan Fluette. Take a journey through the pictorial history of War Room in a culture that celebrates the weak. Show your support by standing with the rebels. Go to doitfluette.com or scan the QR code on your screen. Use the code RAV20 for 20% off your order. Stand with the rebels and never back down.
Happens when the fourth turning meets fifth generation warfare.
A commentator, international social media sensation, and former Navy intelligence veteran.
This is Human Events with your host, Jack Posobiec.
Christ is
on this vote. The yeas are 215, the nays are 214, with one answering present. The bill is passed.
New Jersey Congresswoman LaMonica McIver could get 16 years in prison if she's convicted of shoving an ICE officer during that Newark melee. And now there are calls to maybe expel McIver from Congress.
A local judge in Massachusetts is trying to force the United States to bring back these uniquely barbaric monsters who present a clear and present threat to the safety of the American people and American victims. While we are fully compliant with the law and court orders, it is absolutely absurd for a district judge to try to dictate the foreign policy and national security of the United States of America.
President Trump is fast-tracking energy projects, nuclear, as we just heard, but also oil and coal.
U.S. intelligence suggests Israel is preparing for a potential strike on Iranian nuclear facilities.
The deadly shooting in Washington, D.C., happening right outside the Capitol Jewish Museum, where a young diplomat's reception organized by the American Jewish Committee was being held. A man and woman, both staffers at the Israeli embassy, were killed. A man detained and handcuffed by event security was heard chanting, "Free, free Palestine."
No, no, no.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard today's edition of Human Events Daily, here live, Washington, D.C. Today is May 22nd, 2025, Anno Domini. Well, folks, unhuman violence has made its way to street assassinations in Washington, D.C. This comes on the heels of the left embracing Luigi Maggioni, the left endorsing him, supporting him, CNN platforming Luigi Maggioni's fandom, Caitlin Collins sharing out a link for Luigi Maggioni's crowdfund, Taylor Lorenz, formerly of the Washington Post, going on television and saying that she felt joy when Luigi Maggioni killed a man in cold blood, and the coddling of killers like Carmelo Anthony and killers from Tren de Aragua and MS-13. I went to the White House several weeks ago and warned about the rise of the left's embrace of assassination culture and said that there will be more of this, specifically in Washington, D.C., if something is not done about it. These unhumans, these people, they hate the world, they hate humanity, they hate themselves. And remember, I want to be clear about this. This was not done for the people of Palestine. Luigi Maggioni's shooting was not done over healthcare rights. BLM was not conducted over racial harmony. Okay? The violence is the point. The violence is the tactic. Race communism, race Marxism is done because they want the violence. Everything else is window dressing. Everything else is just a sales pitch to get you to go along with it, to justify it. And unfortunately, there are so many people in our country. Elizabeth Warren said this is a warning. AOC said she could understand why Luigi Maggioni did it. Well, guess what? It's come now to the nation's capital, and two young victims, Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Lynn Milgram, have lost their lives because of this street assassination. Absolutely horrible and disgusting. And understand, though, folks, there are people in this country who support this and want to see more of it. We'll be right back. Human Events Daily. Quick break.
Understand what America First truly means.
Welcome to the Second American Revolution.
All right, Jack Posobiec, we are back here, Human Events Daily, Washington, D.C., where, unfortunately, unhuman violence has claimed the lives of two young diplomats here in the city just a few hours ago. Folks, listen up. Because if you're still drinking that corporate watered-down nonsense, it's time for a serious wake-up call. Blackout coffee is not just coffee. It is a statement, a declaration that you're done with weak beans and weak values. This is high-octane American roasted fuel for those who grind harder, stand taller, and never back down. Look, I love Blackout coffee. This is the thing that gets me going. They just sent me another couple of bags. My dad keeps stealing it, but again, it was his birthday yesterday, so happy birthday, Dad. Don't worry, folks. I got him a whole bunch of Blackout. So you can have your own now, Dad. You don't have to keep stealing mine. Folks, Blackout coffee is cranking out more bags than ever. They're shipping faster than ever and keeping you locked in with coffee that actually fires you up, whether you're chasing big goals, crushing the daily grind, or just refusing to drink coffee made by people who hate you. Blackout Coffee has your back, so stop settling. Go to blackoutcoffee.com. Use our promo code, which is, of course, promo code POSO, for 20% off your first order. Drink like a patriot. Drink Blackout. That's blackoutcoffee.com/POSO. Stop waiting and wake up. So one of the cases of violence that we're talking about, and certainly have been talking about for a long time, is the rise of BLM, which led to something that has been referred to as the fall of Minneapolis. And the reporter who put together that documentary, The Fall of Minneapolis, joins us now from Alpha News. It is Liz Collin. Liz, how are you?
Doing well, Jack. Good to see you. Thanks for having me back.
Liz, can you believe it has been 5 years since the George Floyd moment?
You know, I think in so many ways, so much has changed. But then also, I think I've been reminded this week, if you pay any attention to the mainstream news, how little has changed. And that's sort of been our goal for these last few years, to try to wake people up. Here is the truth about what actually took place in all of this. But, you know, even in your first segment, what you were talking about, just sort of normalizing violence, we still have this, you know, sort of peaceful protest messaging that's being put on us here in Minnesota, despite, you know, 1,500 businesses being damaged or destroyed in the riots. And let's not forget about the homicide rate that has completely skyrocketed in the last few years, and crime rate just overall, not just in Minneapolis, but across the state of Minnesota, across the country. And I truly think, Jack, that until people acknowledge this, tell the truth, I'm not sure how this gets better. And you know, I'm kind of curious what you think there as well.
I think we do need truth, and I also think that we need really just a zero tolerance policy for violence. Violence is never acceptable. It doesn't matter what cause you support or what your opinions are on some far off conflict, or what your opinions are about law enforcement, et cetera. Guess what? We live in a free country. There is a place for things like that. It is called the ballot box. We have the First Amendment. We have bent over backwards to allow people to express their First Amendment rights in this country, which don't exist, by the way, anywhere else in the world. Go to England right now. You get arrested for tweets and memes and posts on Facebook. We have this in the United States. And so when anyone turns to violence, they need to be brought to justice immediately. And unfortunately, there are too many people who have taken this soft position on political violence. And that's why the flames have fanned, I think, to the point where they are. Now, something I think, though, when it comes to getting to the truth of this also matters as well. I've talked about it for a long time. You've talked about it for a long time. Where are we at, and where are you at on your reporting on the case of Derek Chauvin?
You know, we actually just put out a recent series over at Alpha News. You can find it on Alpha News MN. That's our YouTube channel. But 3 different parts. We have a long conversation with Tu Tao. He's one of the police officers still in prison. He was keeping the crowd back that day. He was given an extra year on his sentence because he was reciting Bible verses during his sentencing. And the far left judge in Hennepin County, Peter Cahill, did not like that, added another year to his sentence. He will be out this coming fall. Our second story in the series focuses on Alex King, the black police officer who arrested George Floyd, that the media completely ignored because, of course, this was also all about a racial reckoning, despite all of these officers being from a mixed race background. But don't let the facts actually get in the way of this divisive narrative they were trying to push on the public. And then our third part in the series we just released a couple days ago, and that's kind of a behind the scenes of this defamation case that has been dismissed against us now, and how this has really brought more of the truth to light about this testimony involving now Assistant Police Chief Katie Blackwell of the Minneapolis Police Department, and all of these officers coming forward to say that she perjured herself in Derek Chauvin's trial. So those are all available for free to see on our YouTube channel. And this week, though, you'll like this, Jack. I was referred to by Minnesota's largest newspaper. They are the Star Tribune, a soulless filmmaker. I'm a political extremist, just in case you were wondering. And they went after us saying George Floyd's story is being rewritten. This narrative is being rewritten, but yet they turned off all of the comments related to that story on all of their social media channels. So that is what we deal with here in Minnesota. And sadly, the public is worse off for it because they're simply just not even getting the truth.
Well, Liz, what's going on here is that when we live in a time of lies, and when those in power are able to maintain their power because of lies, the most threatening individual to them is the truth teller. And that's what you have been, and that's what your reporting has been, simply telling the truth so that these lies that they derive their power base from will be eroded, because they rightly view the truth as a threat to their power, a threat to their infrastructure, and that's exactly what it is. By the way, they could easily just come clean and tell the truth and then stand before the voters of the city, the voters of the state, but it's quite interesting that they don't seem to want to do that. We actually have a clip, I think, from one of your recent interviews that sort of gets to this that I want to play now.
You have the body camera withheld from the public for months. Do you think if they would have just come out and told the truth about everything from the beginning, we'd even be here?
Absolutely not. No. I mean, the things would not happen in the way. That 100% of all that evidence is the autopsy. Some people are, oh, I don't care about the autopsy. Well, how can you not care about the autopsy? It's all part of the evidence of the whole case. You bring all that out, lay it all on the table, let everybody look at it. And no, we're not going to be here.
So the truth really mattered here and they didn't tell it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so give us the context. What was he saying there?
Yeah, as part of these stories, we talked to some former Minneapolis police officers that went ahead and did these declarations for our case. They were very courageous to come forward and speak out against the number two in charge of the police department. But they talked about that. Just this gutted the Minneapolis Police Department down about 40% still now 5 years later. And actually just yesterday we saw the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Fry, and the current police chief, Brian O'Hara, stand before reporters and talk about, this federal consent decree. They've now said that the DOJ is not going to impose this in Minneapolis, but they are so desperate to have, more oversight on these officers that remain. And they were just talking about how they're moving forward with their own consent decree anyway. It really is crazy. Despite the fact that there, is no evidence that these actually work, despite the fact that, again, crime is out of control. Things aren't even tracked anymore. And so we brought a lot of those voices to the table in these stories. And what's really sad is you just don't see these people on being interviewed by anyone else. And,
No, you don't.
We've always said with this story to get as close to the truth as possible. And that's what we've been trying to do.
Quick break coming up. By the way, I know that our new DOJ Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights has also been talking about the misuse of these consent decrees, Harmeet Dillon, and it occurs to me that I should probably get the two of you chatting about that. Perhaps you can come all the way to D.C. to give a briefing on just how horrible this has been. Folks, we're putting things into action because this is an action network here on Human Events. You're listening to Jack Posobiec, Real America's Voice, Salem Radio Network.
Welcome back to this Real America's Voice news break. I'm Terrence Bates. We're following new news out of the White House, where a press briefing just wrapped up about 30 minutes ago. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirming that President Trump just spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and the two are planning to work out some sort of deal, or at least hoping to work out some sort of deal with Iran.
Does the White House have any concerns?
Thank you, Caroline. The fifth round of nuclear talks between Iran and the U.S. is going to take place on Friday in Rome. What is the president anticipating ahead of that? And if a deal doesn't come from that meeting, is he going to walk away?
Well, I'm glad you brought up Iran, because I do have an update. The president spoke to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today. They had a productive discussion. They discussed many things, including, of course, the tragic shooting that took place here in Washington, D.C. last night. But they also did talk about a potential deal with Iran, which the president believes is moving along in the right direction. And as the president told me, and he's told all of you, this deal with Iran could end in two ways. It could end in a very positive diplomatic solution, or it could end in a very negative situation for Iran. So that's why these talks are taking place later this week.
As for the tragedy she discussed, President Trump sending his condolences to the families of two Israeli embassy staff members who were murdered in the nation's capital. It all happened Wednesday night while the duo was leaving an event at a Jewish museum. The victim yelled, "Free, free Palestine," after being arrested. In a True Social post, President Trump writing, "These horrible D.C. killings, based obviously on anti-Semitism, must end now. Hatred and radicalism have no place in the USA." Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is out with a similar message, saying, "We are witnessing the terrible price of anti-Semitism and wild incitement against Israel." By the way, following the attack, the Israeli mission in Washington beefed up its security. We're also learning this morning that the two people killed are a couple. They were set to get engaged next week. That's a quick check of your headlines. I'm Terrence Bates.
Today, they talk about influencers. These are influencers, and they're friends of mine. Jack Posobiec. Where's Jack? Jack, he's done a great job.
All right, Jack Posobiec, we are back live, Human Events Daily. We're also here on Real America's Voice and the Salem Radio Network. We're on with Liz Collin of Alpha News, where she's been putting out just a ton of reports, but we're looking back on the 5th year of the quote-unquote racial reckoning of George Floyd, the anniversary of which I believe is Sunday. And now we're seeing this truth that's come out about the dismissed lawsuit, defamation case against herself and Alpha News, and also Derek Chauvin's response. Liz, can you walk us through that?
Yeah, as I was talking about, Jack, with these 3 stories that we put out recently, we wanted to do this because we knew that this was going to be what was happening. Again, we see the corporate media continue to poison the public, just desperately cling to this dangerous narrative that just simply is not true. The facts do not add up in this case. It seems like we've forgotten about how to actually be reporters, especially in Minnesota. But Derek himself, you hear from him in this story, and he very frankly says that Katie Blackwell committed perjury in his state trial. Katie Blackwell was in charge of the training unit at MPD at the time that Chauvin and the 3 other officers were charged. She takes the stand and she simply says, "I do not recognize this technique. No, I do not recognize this technique. I don't know what kind of improvised technique this is." You also have then former police chief now, Madera Arredondo, who has since resurfaced just this last month or so because he's peddling a book. He's selling a book about his leadership, which is really quite a head scratcher. And he still is focused on all of these racial components to this case, again, that don't exist. And these officers have spoken with me very candidly about his, so-called leadership, never once talking to any of these officers involved. And he also admits he never even watched the body camera footage of this case. He says in his own words, the decision right there to fire Derek and the other officers, not actually knowing then that you had George Floyd talking about how he couldn't breathe long before he was on the ground, long before, George Floyd himself has to be laid on the ground. He didn't know, obviously, that Thomas Lane called for an ambulance 36 seconds after that took place. That Tu Tao, another officer, was asking, where is that ambulance? And sort of upping their response. So it's truly amazing to me how so many people choose at this point to remain in the dark about what happened that day back in 2020.
Well, and the officers, the response, and again, psychologically, it's one of these things where people would much rather believe their narratives, and a narrative that is repeated ad infinitum, and certainly was in 2020. But because it was so polarized at the time, nobody wanted to hear the truth. Now here we are 5 years later, and I think people are finally starting to be able to hear it. But unfortunately for Derek Chauvin, it hasn't been, it comes as perhaps good news, but he's actually borne the brunt of it. So while society can move on, he cannot, because he's still behind bars.
Yeah, and at this point, he will remain behind bars for more than a decade to come. There were some rumors circulating recently that we, chose not to report on because, again, it seemed almost as something being stirred by the left, but that President Trump would grant him a federal pardon. Complicates things a bit as well, because he would still be brought back to Minnesota, and our governor, Tim Walz, and our attorney general, Keith Ellison, couldn't say enough when those rumors were circulating how no, he's going to come back here and serve every last second in prison, in a state prison. But you do see, Jack, and I'm sure you see this as well, just the comments and how the tide, I think, has turned quite a bit when it came to this situation, because I think simply before, people weren't exactly aware of what took place. And so that's what we've been trying to do is counter this. And at least there are facts now, and there's no excuse really, not to know. And that's always been my message all along, question this information, think for yourself, think critically rather than, just taking, what these people are saying for the truth, because see what's in it for them.
As that.
And that's what I think is quite telling.
Amen. Liz Collin, we're just about out of time here. Human Events, where can people go to follow you and get access to these new reports?
Yeah, you'll find me Liz Collin on X, and you'll see them there. But Alpha News MN on our YouTube channel, or alphanews.org. It's all there. But really appreciate your support always, Jack. Thanks for fighting the good fight.
Folks, one day they are going to be naming journalism awards after Liz Collin. If we are able to actually win this thing. If we're able to win, that's what victory conditions look like, folks. We'll be right back here at Human Events. Going to have a deep dive on the big, beautiful bill when we return. Real America's Voice and the Salem Radio Network. Jack Posobiec.
Welcome to this Real America's Voice news break. I'm Terrence Bates. House Republicans are taking a bit of a victory lap after passing President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act. It came down to a 215 to 214 vote in the early morning hours of today, following a marathon 24-plus hour hearing in the House Rules Committee in order to clear the way for today's vote.
Thank God for House Republicans, and thank God for our president, Donald J. Trump. His vision, alongside the work of my colleagues, made today a historic day. Behind me is what you see, a unified Republican conference with phenomenal leadership. And this Republican conference works as a team. This transformational legislation will provide safety and security for generations to come.
GOP holdouts Chip Roy and Ralph Norman had a change of heart and ultimately supported the bill. House Freedom Caucus Chairman Andy Harris apparently remains on the fence as he voted present. Republican Representatives Thomas Massey of Kentucky and Warren Davidson of Ohio were no votes. Republican Congressmembers David Schweikert of Arizona and Andrew Garbarino of New York didn't vote at all. We're, of course, working to confirm reports that one of them fell asleep and missed a vote while the other showed up moments too late in order to cast his vote. President Trump sending his condolences to the families of 2 Israeli embassy staff members who were murdered in the nation's capital. It all happened Wednesday night while the duo was leaving an event at a Jewish museum. The victim yelled, "Free, free Palestine," after being arrested. In a Truth Social post, President Trump writing, "These horrible DC killings based obviously on anti-Semitism must end now. Hatred and radicalism have no place in the USA." Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is out with a similar message saying, "We are witnessing the terrible price of anti-Semitism and wild incitement against Israel." That's a quick check of your headlines. I'm Terrence Bates.
And Jack, where's Jack? Where's Jack? Where is he? Jack, I want to see you. Great job, Jack. Thank you. What a job you do. You know, we have an incredible thing. We're always talking about the fake news and the bad, but we have guys, and these are the guys that should be getting Pulitzers.
All right, Jack Posobiec, we are back live here, Washington, D.C. You're on Real America's Voice as well as live on the Salem Radio Network. Hour 3, Charlie Kirk audience. Want to welcome them in. We've got a big treat for you guys because there's a lot going on in Washington, D.C., so we had to put this together. Of course, we saw that the big, beautiful bill, President Trump's bill, passed the House last night. Ton of debate. Passes with one vote, actually at 6 a.m. in the morning. This thing passed, so they were held overnight holding these debates. And yet it will soon head over to the Senate. There will be a process of reconciliation, and we're going to see how this all shakes out. And so I wanted to, and because this is a money fight, this is a budget bill, and I wanted to bring on someone who wasn't a politician, someone who doesn't have an R or a D or a representative of a certain place and isn't standing for election, but someone who actually understands the business world and understands the economy in a way that will help us understand what this bill does, doesn't do, could perhaps be made better. And that is Jeff Webb. He's the CEO of the Human Events Media Group and a business entrepreneur in his own right. Jeff, how are you?
Jack, great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. So when you look at the bill, just give me your sense, just from the hip. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Some parts, other parts? What's your sense of it?
The answer is yes. It's a start. And if you look at the alternative, which would be to let the original tax cuts expire and begin negotiating line by line different bills to try to get them through, which would never happen. I think it's better than that. Is it flawed? Does it have some things that I think could be a lot better? Of course. But, again, this is the problem, Jack, with having a very, very slim majority in the House. Individual congressmen. And I'm not even talking about Democrats, Republicans, have a disproportionate say in what a final bill looks like. Because just a few of them, as we saw almost happen, could take a particular issue, focus on that, threaten to completely blow up the whole legislation. So they end up getting certain provisions that we may not like. And that's what's happened here. You're right about it's going to be interesting to see what happens when the bill gets to the Senate. But I think, you know what, I think it's a start. And it does beat the alternative of having nothing.
Well, we know that one of the big pieces of this that came up and social media was really firing off on this was the question of the SALT deduction and the SALT cap. And that's something for a lot of my readers and listeners were saying, what is this? You know, why does this matter? Is this a big deal? So I was wondering if I could ask you if you could walk us through the SALT deduction and why it does matter.
Sure. Well, if you live in a blue state, where you have high personal income tax in particular, and you're a high income earner, this is a big day for you because you're on the way to a payday. If you're in a red state, and in particular, one of the few red states that has no federal income tax, and maybe you're not a high earner, this is really a bad part of the legislation. You know, SALT stands for state and local taxes, and it's designed, it's a carve out, and it's designed to allow individuals in these high income tax states, take New York, New Jersey, California, to deduct from their taxes a good percentage of what they pay in state and local taxes. So if you're in New Jersey and you've got high state income taxes, you can take a good percentage of that and deduct whatever you're paying in New Jersey from your income at the federal level. Now, if you're not in one of those states and you don't get that benefit, then in effect, you're kind of subsidizing those people that do. So I think it's a terrible thing. I think anything that pits, the income tax itself is bad enough as far as just pitting people against each other. But when you get to this level of these issues that are just so targeted to certain individuals, I think it's just despicable. Hopefully the Senate, I know I've written to my two senators, Bill Hagerty and Marsha Blackburn, to try to reverse this to some extent. But again, you had these congressmen from New York, New Jersey, California, who were threatening to blow up the entire legislation if they didn't get their way here. So that's one of the main provisions that I think is suspect. Hopefully it'll be changed.
And this is something, by the way, so the SALT cap is something that President Trump had actually set quite low in the original tax bill back in 2017 when it was passed. Those, of course, as people know, they are coming up for their expiration date. That's one of the main reasons for this bill. It's not the only reason, but it's another thing that's in this bill to keep the tax cuts going to where they are. But this is one provision specifically on a deduction. And it makes sense with the way you explain that, because I know there were a lot of people saying, how does this work? What is the SALT? Is that like, what's like one of those, like, no. It totally makes sense that if you live in one of those high tax blue states, which I know that, and by the way, believe it or not, Jeff, we do have a lot of listeners in blue states. We have a lot of supporters in blue states, and then you got some folks in, where I'm from in Pennsylvania, where it's a purple state. So, it's we do have the state income tax, but we got a lot of people also in places like Florida and Tennessee and Texas, where the personal income tax is low or doesn't exist. And so that's what makes the difference, because it's actually forcing people who are paying in to the federal government in those red states that don't have the ability to take any deduction, because, you can't deduct from zero. So the deduction from zero is nothing. So all your money is going to the federal government. And then any money that the federal government receives from those individuals, well, guess what? When it goes back to those blue states, then it's all coming from the red states, which is interesting because this is something you hear. Gavin Newsom talks about this all the time. He says, oh, it's the red states that are taking the money. We're subsidizing the red states. He uses this talking point all the time. But where are you, Gavin Newsom, when it comes to SALT deduction? Something tells me that he's all for it, isn't he?
I think he is. And by the way, here's an idea if you want to make things fair. Why don't we say that if you're in a red state, that you can take a deduction since you don't, or let's just say you're in Florida, no state income tax. Let's say then that you say, okay, well, I'll be able to deduct my property taxes. How's that? And that way it'll be fair, because those states, the red states, most of them have found a way to handle their budgets to the best of their ability without having high income taxes. They do it in different ways. And again, I believe that what SALT does, it encourages these states that are inefficient, that are spending way too much money, way beyond their means. It encourages them to keep doing that. It gives them an advantage. So it really does exactly what we don't need. We need more efficiency at all levels of government, and this doesn't work that way.
Well, it doesn't. And you're right. You know, that's a perfect example to say, well, why not deduct your property taxes? Why not deduct this? And it's kind of silly when you think about it, because as everyone knows, state taxes go to state government. Federal taxes go to federal government. So any money or any gap in the state budget, of course, is going to be made up from the federal government. So the idea that you're going to be deducting this from your federal taxes, well, they're going to different pots of money. It's a different place. So there's different programs, there's different levels of government that go through. And by the way,
subsidizing the blue state, their budgets. I'm not sure anybody's in favor of that.
Well, and in addition, I was just going to add that these are the same blue states that a lot of these people, you voted for this. You voted for these governors. You voted for this government in your state that set it up this way. You say, oh, our taxes are too high. Well, then vote against it. You can easily do that.
That's exactly the case. But then, of course, you got to feel sorry for those people in those states who didn't vote for those governors or those legislators who voted kind of our way, if you will, and they're kind of stuck with it. But you know, then get more involved, spend more money, do something to change the people who are making those decisions.
It's so simple. And so it's a classic example. It sounds cliche, but, you know, do as I say, not as I do. Right. So deductions for me, but not for thee. And it's just absolutely classic. And so I do think that that's something. And in fact, I think we're going to make that our question of the day at Human Events. So I want people to go 1776 at humanevents.com, 1776 at humanevents.com. Is the SALT deduction a subsidiary for Democrat governors or blue state governors? So send us your questions, comments, and analysis on that. 1776 at humanevents.com. Jeff, are there any other pieces? Now, I expect this is going to come up in the Senate. Are there any other pieces of the bill, do you think, that when it gets to the Senate side, that they're really going to be getting into the debate over?
Well, apparently the kind of the provisions in Medicaid where, you know, able-bodied people are going to be required to work rather than receive the benefit. You know, when you go back and look at the expansion in Medicaid, especially the ramp up beginning with COVID, where so many people were laid off and out of work, and, you know, they kind of gamed the system and ended up being accepted into Medicaid. I know some examples where there's corruption that involved around that. And, you know, COVID's over, jobs are available, they just haven't gone back. And I've looked up and gone, well, with Medicaid, I've got this, in effect, free insurance. I've got a subsidy. I can probably get a little gig on the side for cash, and then I'll go back to work. I mean, this is only anecdotal, but I believe, certainly my experience has been traveling around, that in general, people talk about customer service, service industry, jobs, things like that. It's not what it used to be. And when you talk to many of these establishments, when you say, what's happened here? This used to be a place I'd love to come to. There was great service, not only great food or great product or whatever. They all say, we can't get enough people. We can't get people to come back to work, and that's going to have to be addressed. Now, in
I think it will. Jeff, real quick, we've got a hard break coming up here in just a couple of seconds. So I want to hold that thought and then get it over to the next side here. You're on with Jeff Webb, business entrepreneur, CEO of Human Events Media Group. We're talking about the big, beautiful bill, the subsidies that are going in, and some things that perhaps we wish we weren't funding. Gee, I wonder what else we could do with some of that money. I don't know, build a bridge, fix a road, get people to school, take care of a hospital, just some basic stuff. We'll be right back. Jack Posobiec, Real America's Voice, and the Salem Radio Network.
America. Get ready to launch into the future of freedom at the largest student event in the nation. SAS is back. Join thousands of fellow students ready to pioneer a bold new era for America at our Student Action Summit. And we're bringing in the biggest voices in the movement. Featuring Charlie Kirk, Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, Dr. Ben Carson, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, Brandon Tatum, James O'Keefe, Benny Johnson, Jack Posobiec, and more. From July 11th through 13th in Tampa, Florida. Register now at SAS2025.com.
When I'm working long hours, I'm always listening to Human Events with Jack Posobiec.
All right, Jack Posobiec, we are back here, Human Events Daily Live, Real America's Voice, Salem Radio Network. We're on with Jeff Webb, the CEO of the Human Events Media Group, as well as a business entrepreneur. Jeff, one of the things that, and by the way, thank you so much. I'm reading the comments here. People are saying, we had no idea what the SALT deduction was. We didn't understand why it worked. We didn't know if we should be for it or against it. And people are just over the moon about this because they're saying, now I totally get it. This is a joke. And it wasn't until Jeff came on and walked us through that, and he did it in such an expert way that and an easy to understand way as well, that people kind of get it now and they say, well, wait a minute, no, I like it the old way where it was, set very, very low. One of the other pieces of this, though, that I know a lot of people have gotten into, Scott Adams has been talking about this on his show, is how that unfortunately this will add to the debt. And the debt issue has become a ticking time bomb and really is a debt bomb where we've been spending money, we've been printing money, we've been borrowing money from the Chinese and the Saudis and others. And unfortunately, there are huge concerns that a lot of people have with the debt.
Well, you're right. And I think I wrote a book about this a few years ago, and it's been frustrating because I think people have not focused on the national debt like it needs to be focused on. And Jack, you're exactly right. The perfect words, ticking time bomb. And especially for those in the younger generations, people like me, that the boomers are going to time out on this. And you're going to be left with this huge nut to crack. And there's not a happy ending there. And unfortunately, this bill does add to the deficit. And how does that, what does that mean? Well, it means interest rates are higher. It means who's going to pay? I mean, if you own a home and you're spending money and you're running your credit cards up, I mean, you're getting that interest. Eventually, you have to pay the principal back too. And there aren't very many pleasant ways to do that. And I'm hoping President Trump has talked about it. I'm hoping once we get this bill in, and if we get it passed, that we're going to put some things in place that also begin to address that debt. Because again, it reflects itself in highest interest rates. The whole generation of young people who are having a hard time buying a home, getting a loan with an interest rate that makes it attractive. This is one of the things that reflects this large national debt that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So I'm glad you bring it up. It's something that has to be addressed. It has to.
Jeff, let people know while you're on here, and we've got you coast to coast on the Salem Radio Network. Let people know, by the way, you mentioned the book. Tell people the name of the book and where they can get it.
Well, it's the book. Well, you can find it on Amazon. In fact, Jack, let me hold the copy up right here. You gave me the chance. It's called American Restoration, and the subtitle is How to Unshackle the Great Middle Class. And it talks about, I grew up in the middle class, and probably lower middle class, and it talks about the things, the everyday issues that people need to be focusing on that have an impact on the middle class. One of the things that has set this country apart.
Jeff, hold it up again, by the way. Hold it up real quick.
Okay. Yep. I'll hold the book up. Yep.
The book, you want to see it so people can see it. There it is, American Restoration, Unshackle the Great Middle. And Jeff, you wrote this even before President Trump returned to office, and now would you say that he's pursuing the right kind of policies to actually do that?
I think in general he is. It also addresses things I know near and dear to your heart, like endless foreign wars. And how we have sent generations of young people off to die in the sands of the Middle East and other places for nothing. And I think we're really beginning to get our arms around that now. But in general, I think on most of these issues, President Trump's on the right track.
Well, I think that's fantastic, and this is amazing because it's populism. What we're talking about. It's conservative ideals, but understanding that the conservative ideals don't mean anything if they're not actually helping people. That none of this stuff means anything if you're not actually helping the people of the country. They're the ones who make the country work. They're the ones who make our companies run, that work in our enterprises, and that are ultimately served by it. Jeff, if people want more information, is there a place they can go to follow you or just to get the book?
We'll go to Amazon to get the book, and they can reach me at jwebb@humanevents.com.
There you go. All right, folks, he's putting his email out. Jeff Webb walking us through the ticking time bombs, but also the potential opportunities in the big, beautiful bill. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, you have my permission to lay ashore.